Have you ever caught yourself thinking, something's changed, but I can't figure out what? Sometimes the signs are right in front of us, but we overlook them because the truth can be uncomfortable. Maybe it's her sudden indifference, her phone never leaving her side, or subtle shifts in the way she communicates with you. It might feel like paranoia, but believe me, small behaviors can speak louder than any confession. Here, we're going to talk about the signs that often go unnoticed. This isn't about accusing or feeding insecurities, but about opening your eyes to behaviors that could indicate infidelity, or at the very least, a relationship in crisis. After all, no one wants to live in a bubble of doubt, right? The good news is that by recognizing the patterns, you can take action before it's too late. Get ready to learn practical and psychological tips to spot when something's off. From a distant gaze during a conversation to inconsistent stories, there are clear ways to detect what's going on. This isn't about blind suspicion, but about emotional intelligence. And if you think this all sounds like an overreaction, stick with me. What's coming next might completely change the way you view relationships. Have you noticed how subtle changes in the behavior of someone close to you can reveal more than words ever could? One classic, often overlooked sign is a shift in how they use their phone. Before, it might have been left lying around without a care. Now, it's always within arm's reach, protected by a password. Harmless, right? But in the psychology of relationships, these gestures can carry deep truths about behavioral changes, or even a relationship in crisis. Picture this. You're both sitting on the couch, her phone vibrates, and before you can even think of glancing at it, she grabs it like it's a vault. On its own, this gesture might not mean anything, but when combined with other signs of indifference or distance in the relationship, it might be time to pay closer attention. Small signals like this can be clues that something has shifted, even if she denies or downplays it. A practical tip for handling this: ask casually and without an accusatory tone. Something like, "You seem more protective of your phone lately. Did something happen?" This approach can create space for honest dialogue if there's something to be shared. Pay attention to her reaction, though. Evasiveness or irritation might indicate you've touched a nerve. Don't underestimate the power of patterns. If she's suddenly spending more time on her phone and less time with you, it could reflect a lack of interest in the relationship or the emergence of a new emotional focus in her life. Relationship psychology suggests that these shifts in attention might be tied to an emotional disconnect or even external validation. A real-world example: a friend once noticed his wife never left her phone visible anymore. Curious, he started observing other behaviors. He noticed she seemed distant, disengaged from routine conversations, and distracted. Eventually, their open dialogue revealed she was struggling with personal issues she hadn't been able to articulate. It wasn't infidelity, but the lack of communication had taken its toll on their connection. The key takeaway? Pay attention, but don't jump to conclusions. Relationships thrive on trust, but they also require a keen awareness of behavior. If the phone has become a source of mystery, it might be time to look beyond it to understand what else could be happening. Communication is your best tool, not assumptions. Do you know that feeling of talking to yourself even when you're not alone? Indifference in a relationship is like a silent scream. Unlike arguments or disagreements, which at least show some level of engagement, apathy is a quiet but serious sign that something might be wrong. Does she respond with one-word answers, avoid eye contact, or seem entirely uninterested? This could be more serious than it appears. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're excitedly sharing a work project that thrilled you. In the past, she might have asked questions or offered suggestions, but now she barely replies with a dismissive, "That's nice." In relationship psychology, this kind of behavior can signal growing emotional disconnection or disinterest. Don't ignore it. If this indifference becomes a pattern, pay attention to other signs. Is she avoiding one-on-one time, cancelling plans with vague excuses? Indifference rarely appears out of nowhere. It might be her way of expressing dissatisfaction without putting it into words, or dealing with conflicting feelings about the relationship. A practical exercise to address this is to try rekindling the connection in a spontaneous, pressure-free way. Plan something unexpected, like a dinner out or a walk to revisit good memories. Sometimes, a simple gesture can reignite the spark and offer insight into what's happening. However, if her reaction remains indifferent even in these moments, it's a red flag. A friend once told me he realized his marriage was in trouble when his wife stopped complaining about little things. She used to get upset when he left a wet towel on the bed. Later, she said nothing at all. It seemed like peace at first, but it was the silence of disconnection. He had to act quickly, initiating a dialogue before it was too late. Indifference in a relationship is like a plant not being watered. At first, you might not notice, but over time, everything wilts. It's an alarm that shouldn't be ignored because sometimes the solution lies in understanding and addressing the root cause before it grows out of control. Discovering the truth in a relationship can feel like a strategic game, one of the most effective techniques. Asking someone to recount a story in reverse order. It sounds simple, but it's a powerful psychological tool. When a story is fabricated, it often flows naturally in chronological order. Reversing this logic disrupts the mental script of someone lying, exposing inconsistencies. Imagine she says she went shopping with a friend. Instead of asking how her day went, try something like, "Oh, that's nice. What did you do right before leaving?" If her answer is filled with long pauses or contradictions, it might signal that the story isn't as solid as it seems. This isn't about accusing, it's about observing. Small slip-ups can reveal a lot. Additionally, pay close attention to body language. When someone shares a true story, their gestures are typically natural and congruent. Lies, on the other hand, often come with disconnected behaviors like avoiding eye contact, fidgeting excessively, or noticeable shifts in tone. Detecting lies isn't just about words, it's about the whole picture. How to apply this in practice? Staying calm is crucial. Someone lying usually feels pressured to convince, so creating a relaxed environment can work in your favor. For example, you could casually mention something irrelevant during the conversation to observe their reaction. Lies dislike interruptions because they force improvisation, which often leads to mistakes. A friend once used this technique when he suspected his girlfriend's behavior. Instead of following her story chronologically, he started with the end of her evening. Her hesitation and muddled details revealed more than he had anticipated. This example shows how subtle cues can be more revealing than outright confessions. Remember, the goal here isn't to hunt for guilty parties, but to understand what might be behind unusual behavior. In a strained relationship, even uncomfortable but honest conversations can prevent small issues from becoming insurmountable barriers. Abrupt changes in behavior within a relationship rarely go unnoticed. If she used to seem controlling or consistently interested in your activities, but suddenly starts giving you more freedom, it might feel like a relief at first. However, in relationship psychology, this shift can indicate that something has changed, and not always for the better. For instance, she once questioned the details of your schedule or was curious about who you were with. Now, phrases like, "Don't worry, you don't need to tell me," start to appear. While this might seem like growth or maturity, it could mask underlying issues. A relationship in crisis often carries subtle emotional disguises like this. A practical example. A friend noticed that his previously jealous girlfriend began encouraging him to go out without her. Initially, he felt relieved, but soon realized that while he was enjoying his freedom, she was also taking advantage of hers. Such sudden transitions might be a way to divert attention or in extreme cases, conceal infidelity. While this isn't always true, a noticeable change in behavior is a valid reason to pay attention. How to handle this? Create space for genuine dialogue. Ask casually and without pressure. I've noticed you've been giving me more space lately. Is everything okay? This not only paves the way for an open conversation, but also shows that you've picked up on the change, which can prevent mutual misunderstandings. The goal here isn't to become paranoid, but to recognize that unexpected encouragement for freedom, especially from someone who was previously more controlling, warrants attention. It might reflect indifference in the relationship or even an attempt to ease potential guilt. Either way, observing and opening up a dialogue are far more productive than jumping to conclusions. These signs are like pieces of a puzzle. On their own, they might not mean much, but when combined with other behaviors, they can form a clearer picture. At that point, communication becomes essential to prevent assumptions from growing into barriers that are difficult to overcome. Communication is the foundation of any relationship, but when it begins to change, it's impossible not to notice. If conversations that once flowed naturally are now filled with silences or short responses, it might be a sign that something is different. Changes in communication patterns, such as increased secrecy or disinterest in sharing daily life, are red flags that deserve attention. Imagine that she used to tell you every detail about her work or conversations with friends. Now, when you ask about her day, the answer is vague. Oh, nothing much. It may seem insignificant, but in relationship psychology, these shifts can indicate that something or someone else is occupying her attention. It's not just about what is said, but what's left unsaid that matters. Another common sign is how much time is spent on the phone or social media. If she suddenly spends more time texting or scrolling than talking with you, it might be time to take a closer look. There's no need to accuse, but casually asking something like, "You've been chatting a lot lately. Is there something new going on?" could open the door to a constructive conversation. A friend once noticed that his wife, who was always open, started locking her phone and avoiding calls when he was around. When he tried to address it, she reacted impatiently, which only heightened his suspicions. Eventually, they discovered she was dealing with personal struggles she didn't know how to share. This shows that secrecy doesn't always mean betrayal, but silence creates barriers that need to be addressed. Secrecy in a relationship is like a curtain. You can pretend it's not there, but it blocks your view of what's truly important. The key here is to foster conversations that don't feel like interrogations. Light comments and genuine interest can help break down walls and rebuild trust if something is amiss. Changes in communication patterns should never be ignored. Even small signs can be like cracks in a bridge. The sooner they're identified, the easier it is to repair before the structure collapses. And when it comes to relationships, repairing is always worth the effort. Changes in cell phone habits, growing indifference, and shifts in communication. These situations may seem minor on their own, but together they paint a much broader picture of the relationship's state. Each of these signs, no matter how subtle, is an invitation for reflection. They're not just isolated actions, they're pieces of an emotional puzzle that require attention and sensitivity to assemble. Speaking of sensitivity, one of the biggest mistakes is ignoring or downplaying these behaviors. Doing so creates fertile ground for emotional distance to grow. After all, relationships in crisis don't happen overnight. They build over layers of silence, mistrust, and behavioral changes. Detecting the signs in time is the first step to preventing those layers from becoming insurmountable walls. A friend once shared how he noticed all these signs simultaneously, but chose to pretend nothing was wrong. The result? The emotional distance only widened, and what could have been resolved through a conversation turned into a breakup. This underscores the importance of paying attention not just to signs of disinterest, but also to what those signs may be trying to communicate. The big question is, how should you respond? Should you initiate a conversation or wait, question or trust? The answer depends on the context, but one thing is clear: ignoring the issue is never the solution. Often, problems in a relationship can be resolved before they become irreversible, as long as both partners are willing to confront reality and work together. It's essential to remember that the answers to the most pressing questions aren't always in grand gestures or words, but in the careful reading of subtle signs. Whether you're trying to identify betrayal or rekindle a lost connection, every detail matters. Even those that seem insignificant might hold the key to a positive change. This leads to an important follow-up. How can you turn these insights into practical actions to save the relationship, or at the very least, seek clarity? This next step requires courage, patience, and above all, a willingness to look beyond the obvious to understand the deeper issues at play. Have you stopped to think about how many signs might be going unnoticed? Now that you're aware of the key indicators that something might be off, it's time to take action. What will you do with this information? Will you ignore the signs and hope everything resolves itself? Or will you face the situation head-on, seeking the truth and protecting what matters to you? Remember, relationships aren't built on love alone, but on attention, communication, and the courage to confront discomfort. Ask yourself, what patterns of behavior have you noticed recently? Are you willing to create an honest dialogue, or are there still barriers within yourself that need to be overcome? Most importantly, are you ready to prioritize your emotional peace and make the right decisions? If these reflections resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, you'll find more insights on relationships, behavior, and how to transform doubt into clarity. Don't let this opportunity slip by. The next step toward clarity and confidence is just one click away. We're with you on this journey,